The only one here is me.
They're coming on, don't worry. Okay, let's bring up the text. Hold on. KH Barbara. All right, we're learning a talk from the Rebbe from Parshas Bechukotai. Behar Bechukotai, like this week, and it's from the year Mevarchim, blessing the month of Sivan. This week is not Mevarchim Sivan, we miss it by a day. So, but that year it was the blessing the month of Sivan, meaning getting ready for the new month. So the Rebbe says like this: Asim shakol sedra b'Torah. When we finish any parsha in the Torah, kishem sha'aschala kol parshish sheb'sedra. So when you finish Asim shakol sedra b'Torah, kol is kol parshish sheb'sedra. When you finish a parsha, meaning what we call sedra of the Parshat Behar or Bechukotai, so it includes in it all the parts, the parshas of the parts of that parsha. Kishem sha'aschal is called sedra, kolel is called a parsha sheba. Even just as the beginning includes, so too the end includes. That was going to obviously connect the beginning and end of the parsha, maybe the beginning and end of the Torah, because we finished the book of Vayikra this week. Although there's something unique, obviously, about the finish, on the high, so to say, but nevertheless, it has within it all the elements of the parsha before. That's what the Rebbe is telling us here. The Rebbe says like this: when it comes to things of holiness, we're always elevating in holiness. So the end of a parsha, we're further into the parsha, we're elevating higher. But when a person elevates, when we have elevations in our avoda, it doesn't mean that you can't, that you use the word God forbid, that you, God forbid, let go of everything you achieved until now. You know, I moved up. I want to forget about everything from that I moved up from. So the point is that when you elevate, you also have and retain what you've achieved until that point, right? If you climb 10 steps, when you go to the 11th step, it's not like you didn't climb the 10 steps before that. We don't say, I counted one day, I counted the second day. Each day includes the day before, right? When I say one day, then the next day is 2 days. And last night was, for those who counted, is the 35th or the 36th, right? So it means you're counting, you say 36, though you're counting the 36th night, included in that is the 35 before, because that's number 36, has to have 35 numbers before that. And specifically when you get to the final night, although you've completed everything, you've reached the highest point, but what is the number 49? 49 has 49 days in it that you've counted. So you're not forgetting about what you've achieved yesterday when you elevate today. So though a person is supposed to be elevating, especially when it comes to Sefirat HaOmer, each day of the Sefirat HaOmer, you're climbing higher. Like it's brought down in Chassidic that you're getting closer and closer to the 50th gate of knowledge, of understanding. It doesn't mean you're leaving go of what you've achieved until this point. Therefore, we're counting. The counting includes other days that have been counted. Like I said, when you say the 35th day, by definition, you're counting in it the days before, which is the 34 days before that. So even Misper Koil. Therefore, when we count, we're including the days before. Why? Because whenever we count, we include what we've achieved until now. The Rebbe is getting at something. This idea that even when one elevates, what you've achieved before this last elevation is not lost or forgotten. It's also you elevate within that space. above that space, is the Rebbe says, so this is not just when you go what's called in Chassidus or in Avodah, it's called the Aliyah, when a person elevates in an orderly manner. What does it mean in an orderly manner? At a proper pace, right? If yesterday I did 1, today I did 2, tomorrow I'm doing 3, right? So it's an orderly pace. Yesterday was 1, tomorrow is the second day, and I counted 3 days, I counted 4 days. That's an orderly pace. What happens if you jump? When you're jumping, when you jump without an order, it's kind of like the Malam Seder, beyond Seder. So maybe then you would think that because you're not going at a normal pace or an average pace, so maybe then it's not like because you jumped to another level that's way beyond the level before. So maybe you do forget the level before. The Rebbe said no. Even when you jump in life, when you elevate in life, in a way that's beyond order, so to say. Now the Rebbe is getting to our parsha, that it says, Bechukotai, with my chukim, with my ways you should go. Bechukotai, with my mitzvahs, with the Torah, with my mitzvahs, with the things of Hashem, we should be tailechu, we should be moving. The proper way to move in Yiddishkeit, in Judaism, and this is brought down, we're saying it in short, but to explain in depth in Chassidus, the proof of this, even angels that move, because they move in an orderly pace, therefore it's called that they're standing straight. When it says to be a mahalach, a person of movement, it means that you're moving at a pace that's not regular. So nevertheless, a person may think if I'm moving at a pace that's irregular, that's shalei b'adraga, it's not in an orderly way. Maybe then I'm like just jumping from place to place. I'm not really connected to the place before. And nevertheless, the Rebbe says no. Even when you're moving at a place shalei b'adraga, not in a regular, orderly manner, it means beyond order. Nevertheless, it's because you were the place you were before is how you're able to come to the place you are now. Therefore, that when we have the 49 days of the Homer, so the 49 days of the Homer, in that counting, we do count in an orderly way. We don't go 1 day, 2 days, 10 days, 20 days. We go 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. We count 49 days. That's an orderly way of counting. So there is an order. Shavuos is way beyond the 49 days. That's why it's its own day. It's 1 day. The lake of Pesach and Sukkot is on Yom. It's not even like Pesach and Sukkot. There are 7 days. The holidays of Pesach and Sukkot are a holiday of 7 days. Shavuos is the only biblical holiday that's 1 day. Why is it in 1 day? Because the 7 days of Sukkot and Pesach correspond to the 7 midos. Chesed, Gvura, Tferes, Netzach, Haydisayid, Machos. Like the 7 midos, the 7 attributes that we're refining and focusing on in the counting of the Homer. That shows on Seder. The Seder is Shalshlos. The Seder of the world is in the number 7. Why? That's how God created the world. 6 days He created, and 7th day He rested. The system of 7 days in Shabbos, like the Or Chaim HaKadosh says, the whole world is just 7 days. 7 days, 6 days of the work, 7 days of Shabbos. That's called Seder Shalshlos. That's a system of creation. Hold on a second. So, oops. You guys in the is it still showing? Oh, here we go. Okay. So we're in the system of creation, but when it comes to Shavuos, is the Mechinas Keser. Keser is the crown. The crown is outside of the system of creation. How is it outside? Because in the midos of a person, the Keser represents, and the attributes that represents the Tainug and Ratzin, the desire, the delight, and the want, which is beyond system, beyond. That's how a person could do things out of their ordinary when you really want something. And Shavuos is 1 day because Keser is 1. The Shavuos reaches the level of beyond division. It's not 7 days. It's the oneness of Hashem. Is explained in my Meir connected to Shavuos, to the holiday Shavuos. So when we're going from the 49 days of the Homer, and we reach after that to the 50th day, which is Shavuos, But the Torah tells us, how do you get to Shavuos, even though Shavuos is not an orderly that you went from the 49th to Shavuos. It's a super jump. Nevertheless, the Torah says, how do you get to Shavuos? You have to first count 49 days. You have to get there. Even though you're jumping to the space of the 50th gate that we can't even count. We don't count the 50th gate because it's beyond our ability to count. But you have to count 49 days to get to Shavuos. So from here we see that even when you make a leap that's beyond order, you still need what's before that. The Rebbe says one could ask this theory, that you need to retain, and because of maybe your small achievements that you're able to make a super leap in life. So what we find is a Gemara that teaches us about Rabbi Zeira. Who's Rabbi Zeira? Rabbi Zeira was an Amora that lived in the times of the Talmud. That was in the beginning of his life. He was a student in the yeshivas of Babylonia, and he made the Aliyah. He moved to Eretz Yisrael, to the yeshivas of Rabbi Yochanan, which were in Tveria. So the Gemara tells us that when he went from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, Hisana Meir Oyarboim Tinius. He fasted, even according to one opinion, 100, or other opinions, 40 fasts. He fasted, so he wanted that the effect of the fast should be that he should kind of erase his hard drive and forget everything he studied in the Babylonian yeshivas, so now he could come fresh with a clean, open mind to the Jerusalem, to what's called the Talmud Yishami, to the yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael. So when we see that he had to erase everything of what he achieved until now. So now we see something different than what the Rebbe said. We see for Rabbi Zeira to elevate, which for Rabbi Zeira to elevate to hey Aaron, for Rabbi Zeira to elevate to Eretz Yisrael, he forgot everything he studied in Bavel. So why is the Rebbe saying that even when you make a leap in life, it's based on your achievements, even if they were smaller, ordinary achievements, they're the basis for the ability to even make a leap. This that Reb Zeira forgot what he studied in the yeshivas in Bavel was only in the beginning of his elevation. The Rebbe says that was kind of just a step to get to Eretz Yisrael and to get to the yeshivas of Eretz Yisrael, but we know clearly that it wasn't like he totally erased everything. He kind of filed it. And that was for them later, once he got into Talmud Yerushalmi, he got into the yeshiva, means he wanted to focus. So once he was able to focus, he was able to, of course, draw on all his studies and years that he studied in the yeshivas before. But we must say so. What's the proof? Maybe he did totally erase everything he studied, which is the way we simply understand this piece of Talmud. Because the teachings of Chassidus teach us. Even though that the Talmud teaches us, it's brought down that when it says that I was sat in darkness, as if to say I'm sitting in a dark room, right? When you're in a dark room, you don't see a lot. So too, that is the study of the Talmud Bavli, of the Babylonian Talmud, is like sitting in the darkness versus sitting in the light of the Jerusalem Talmud. We know that at the end of the day is, for many reasons, when it comes to bottom line, and especially our engagement of refining the world, it's specifically found in the Babylonian Talmud, so much so, although there's reasons for this, if there's a disagreement between the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud, the law is according to that Babylonian Talmud. The technical reason is because it was organized later. So they saw everything that they wrote, and nevertheless they argued. But at the end of the day there's a deeper reason behind that. Because there's something to say about sitting in the darkness. So the fact is that when it comes to engaging in elevating the world, the Babylonian Talmud is higher than the Jerusalem Talmud. Therefore, at the end of the day, if there's a disagreement, like I said, between the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud about a certain law, the law is according to the Babylonian Talmud. ואם כן, איך ייתכן שבעלייתו של רבי זיירה לתלמיד ישמעאל נפסק as a mileage לתלמיד בבלי? If at the end of the day we see clearly that there are certain unique things about the Babylonian Talmud, why would he erase everything if he needs to retain the benefits of it? I can't say we must say. Sheshakach Talmudi Bavli Haisarat Betchilas Aliyasei, he filed it in a dark place, so to say. So he should not focus on it, so we could come in with a fresh perspective when he went into the yeshivas of Tveria, in the Talmud Yishami. It's called Talmud Yishami, even though it was at those days, there was no Jewish yeshivas in Jerusalem. The yeshivas were in the Galil and Tveria and Tzipori by Rabbi Yochanan, but it's called Jerusalem Talmud because of Yerushalayim, because of Eretz for covered Yerushalayim. But so when he went to the yeshivas of Rabbi Yochanan, he didn't want to be influenced by what he learned before. So he put it in a file, but later, once he was able to gather the information from Eretz Yisrael, of course he was able to coexist with that and to integrate that with what he studied in his youth in Babylonia. It was only in the beginning of his elevation, when he completed that. Even if you want to say, with regard to if you wanted to look at the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud, that the Babylonian Talmud is superior, that the Jerusalem Talmud is superior over the Babylonian Talmud. So he says, if you got him in the Babylonian Talmud, שהאיני לשחר תלמודי בבלי כדי להביא לתלמיד ישמעאל הוא וחסידס בתור דוגמה על עלייה מעולם הזה לגן עדן. Even if you want to say that the study itself or the Talmud itself in Jerusalem or in Eretz Yisrael is so much greater, nevertheless on Rabbi Zeira himself, when Chassidus wants to explain that how does a person elevate later in life, afterlife, in the Garden of Eden, that you dip into the Nar Dinar. The Nar Dinar is like a fire river in Garden of Eden that you dip in, kind of to erase what you've achieved before, to go to a higher elevation. So you can go up to the higher world, or to go from our world to the next world, you have to kind of forget the world you were in. You can't leave. You can't take your baseball cards with you to the afterlife. You leave all that behind. Everything that we have in the world before, we have to leave behind. And we kind of get dipped into like what's called the Nar Dinar. The Nar Dinar is a space where we kind of forget. We no longer become attached to worldly things, right? So and also this Nar Dinar is as you elevate in the Garden of Eden itself. We need to say, if a person, you have to kind of wipe away in a certain way your priorities, what's important to you when you go into the afterlife. You can't be thinking about the difference between steak and chicken, or cholent and kugel, or how good the herring is in the Shabbos Kiddush. When you go in the Garden of Eden, there's not things you could be thinking about. You have to erase that from things that are important to you. And that's Gashmis, even in Ruchnius, even spiritually. You can't, the way we see things spiritually in this world, you can't imagine that that's how we see it in the world to come, in the Garden of Eden. So we have to erase our attachment, not that we never did these things, but that they're important to us. How we're connected to these ideas, that has to be erased. So an example is given is Rabbi Zeira. That Rabbi Zeira went to Eretz Yisrael. He had to erase how he viewed life in Bavel, including his studies, to go to Eretz Yisrael. But nevertheless, the Rebbe says, you do what's known, Shegan Eden Hurak Tchilas Aliyah. Going to the first Garden of Eden, hopefully everyone gets there, is only the first stage. But eventually, there's going to be the resurrection of the dead. That's even beyond the Garden of Eden and all the levels of the Garden of Eden. Like we say in Shabbos, that we should reach the world to come and to the resurrection of the dead. Then again, we're going to have a physical body. As there's a discussion in the disagreement between Maimonides and Nachmanides, if the world to come is bodies and souls or not, and Chassidus takes the opinion of Nachmanides, Ramban with an N, with a nun, that there is going to be souls and bodies. בפרש מאמר ז"ל, אין בה ריח ושתייה, שאין בה מתחיל יילן שמס בגופם דווקא, that although it says that there's no eating or drinking, nevertheless it's going to be souls and bodies. ונמצא, שאף שבתחילת העלייה לגן עדן צריכים לשכוח אפילו חיזוד HaOmer. And so what do we see? That to get into the Garden of Eden, you have to forget your physical body. How your soul, together with your body, reacted to things of this world, that has to be forgotten because your soul is no longer in the body. So you have to erase that connection. Because when even the godly soul is in the nefesh bahamas, nefesh achiyunis, and in the guf, in the body, it reacts to physical things. Not just the body reacts, the soul reacts. So that connection has to be disconnected when you go to the Garden of Eden. And in order to achieve that disconnection, we get dipped into the nar dinar, which evidently may not be the most pleasant of washings, like any washing. Imagine if someone put you in a washing machine. It's not pleasant to be in a washing machine. So being dipped in the nar dinar may not be the most physically pleasant experience, but it's needed in order to have an elevation. But nevertheless, at the end, we go back to our bodies. We have to forget any kind of feeling of this world. Is in the Gemara, but at our highest point, not only do we remember our body, we go back to our body. And because when the Chassidus says the example of the process, that in the stage of leaving this world initially, we do forget about our feelings of our bodies in order to go to the Garden of Eden. An example is given of Rabbi Zeira, who forgot Shachach Talmud Bavli. He wanted to erase his memory of his studies in his youth in Babylonian yeshivas, never to go to Eretz Yisrael. But if he's the example, we have to use him as the full example. And what's the full example? Eventually we go back to our bodies. It's just in the beginning of the process we have to forget about it. At that stage. So therefore we have to say also about Rabbi Zeira. So therefore we have to assume the same things with Rabbi Zeira. When he went to, it's a simple idea. You have a lot of times we gather tools in our life. And I say tools, I mean ideas or things that we've learned. But we want to go fresh into new idea, and we don't want the things that we've studied before or ideas that we've accepted as fact before to affect how we're going to take in new information. So we take everything that we've learned and we store it deep into ourselves, so it shouldn't have any effect how we receive new information, so we can take it objectively fresh. But later, once we have that information, and we're able to understand it without being affected by our previous notions of things, then it's safe to reintegrate our previous notions and see how they go together. That's where a person truly masters in navigating, taking in information in their life. So that's what the Rebbe is saying about Rabbi Zeira. Rabbi Zeira was able to store everything he studied in his youth, but later, eventually, like the soul comes back to the body. And then the soul and the body have a partnership, not like we have now, where the body kind of dictates and the soul has to compromise constantly with the body on what's ready to give into, what's not ready to give into. Okay, we'll have another piece of kugel, that's whatever. We'll deal with it. We'll work, we'll exercise afterwards. But later when Mashiach comes, the soul and the body are going to be mamish line in the pursuit of kedusha, of holiness. There's no longer going to be the refinement. The same thing, Rabbi Zeira. We have to say, he only forgets about the Jerusalem Talmud in the beginning of his elevation. Later, when he came to Israel, and he was the student of Rabbi Yochanan, and we know the greatness of Rabbi Zeira at all times. He brought back he reintegrated his youth, his study from his youth in the Babylonian Talmud. And we see clearly, he's mentioned in the Babylonian Talmud. He's one of the people that I mentioned. He was both able to, later he was able to navigate both ideas, both ways of thinking. The Rebbe says, this affects every time we have an elevation. What the Rebbe is getting at is, this week's parsha talks about Bechukotai, that we're supposed to be moving. That in life, we have these experiences of Rabbi Zeira, or of how the soul goes through the full system of this world, the next world, and the afterlife, and the resurrection of the dead. We have within our present life like that, experiences. And a lot of times, sometimes we think that we have to totally delete our past in order to get to our present, in order to properly be at our present. The Rebbe says, no. Yes, maybe you have to shelve it, but you don't delete it. You shelve it so you go into a new space, but later you're going to see how these experiences, maybe they were on a low level. Maybe they were in a bad space. Nevertheless, they come back and they're actually part of your character and your life of your present. The Rebbe says this is the way it is in every elevation. This that we say that we have to get rid of our past, or even our elevations of our past that were smaller. This idea that we want to really leap forward. We have to forget about all our achievements before, of all our limitations before, right? Because by definition, a leap means you're springing forward. So you're springing forward is you don't take with you the luggage of everything you had before. I was talking to yesterday someone who was discussing this idea, where he said, we're talking about the Bali Tshuva, someone who's a returnee. He says there's all these leaps, but they're always schlepping with them. They feel like they're carrying with them all the weight from their past. So there has to be this balance. You have, and when you're making the leap, you're putting it to the side, but not deleting it. Later, when you make that leap, when you get to the end of it, then you have also the achievements of those small achievements that got you there, right? When you leap, you have to put your feet on something. You have to be stepping on something. You can't step on ear, otherwise you can't spring forward. And what are you stepping on? What are you pushing yourself back on those seemingly small achievements? Not that you remember that they existed, but they themselves exist. Meaning to say, not just that you have kind of it's safe to have old memories, but actually the way that your past is actually part of your present. And that person will know or be guided when it's safe to make that integration. But usually a person on their own will know when it's safe to reconnect, so to say, maybe with your past, when you're trying to make a leap after you make the leap at the present time now. HaOmer, the Rebbe said, based on what we're saying now, this is all an opening statement. So the Rebbe says, based on the idea that even though we finish on a high note of the Parsha, it includes in it all the stories of the Parsha. So Parshas Behar. So the Rebbe says, now we have to understand about our Parsha, which is the first Parsha, the Parshat Behar. It learns about on the mountain, we learned the laws of sabbatical. The Rebbe says that seemingly not only is there no connection between the beginning of the parsha and the end of the parsha of Parshas Behar, that we could say that the end is an elevation from the beginning, but they seem to be opposite ideas. Why? The Rebbe explains. At the beginning of this week's parsha, meaning Parshas Behar, we start Kisavayu alards. When you enter the land, right? Wow, we're entering the land of Eretz Yisrael. The land is going to rest. So in the entering of the land, we start off right away with the highest level, the level of Shemitah, of the resting of the land. The Kulta Torah explains, and the Kulta Torah asked the question, the obvious question, doesn't make sense. Seemingly from the literal translation of the verse means that as soon as they entered the land, they went right into sabbatical. It's like imagine someone gets a job and says, I'm taking my sabbatical the first year. Doesn't work like that. You have to work 6 years and then you have a sabbatical. So the Torah says, no, we're going to go into the land and immediately have a sabbatical. Why? So the Alter Rebbe says it has to be that way. Because the sabbatical is not a break where you kick back and you're going to go fishing every day and playing golf. Sabbatical means before I even start working the land, I need to get into Shabbos mode. If we go into the land immediately and go right away running with our pitchforks and our plows, and we start working the ground for 6 years without stopping for a second, then how are we going to go into Shabbos? How are we going to go into Shemitah and sabbatical? First, we walk into the land, we don't do nothing. We wait and we do a sabbatical. And that shows us what the purpose of our Avot is. That this is all about Kedusha, holiness. It's not about, okay, we have to give God a year after we finish 6 years. We right away start with Shemitah. Right away we go into Shemitah, into sabbatical. That's above the 6 years of working, because 6 years of working is you're engaging in material. The Rebbe says it's even greater than the 7th year after the 6 years of working. Why? Because the 7th year that comes after the 6 years of working is the completion of the 6 years of working. Here, you go into the first year, you never even worked before. You go in, I'm starting off with Shabbos right away, with Shemitah. Why do I say Shabbos and Shemitah? Because Shabbos and Shemitah are the same idea. 7 days of the week, 7 years, right? So it's all the same. It's Shemitah is just a very long Shabbos. Obviously, it doesn't have all the laws, but it's the same idea that you're disconnecting from the material. God said, I'm going to bless 3 years. Why do you have to bless 3 years around Shemitah? Because you need the year before, the year of, and then because you didn't work that year, so first of all, if you need the 6th year in theory. What is the 3 years that get blessed in sabbatical? The 6th year itself needs a blessing. I need to eat on the 6th year. Then I don't work on the 7th year, so the 6th year has to bless the 7th year. Because I have no food, I didn't work on the 6th year. I am eating on the 7th year. Then I didn't work on the 7th year, so I can't just start eating right away in the 8th year. Why? Because I didn't work for a year. It takes time for things to start growing. So God had to bless the 6th year for a 3-year period, 6, 7, and 8. So and that's not natural. That 1 year should be blessed as the amount of 3 years. And from this we see that although nature says no, if you work for 1 year, you have to eat for 1 year. You can't eat on 3 years for 1 year. So nevertheless, although nature is not going to contradict Torah, it's not even that there's a coexistence between nature and Torah. That nature says, okay, Torah is in charge of the world. Torah decides how it is. That's why in general the halach is, whenever there's a contradiction of how you view things, you say, what's that? How could I do this? How could I keep Shabbos? I have a job. Then you're saying that nature decides how things are. Torah decides how things are. You look in Torah, and Torah tells you how you're supposed to do things. Torah is the balabas. Torah is in charge of the world. And if Torah says that the 7th day you rest, that's how it is. And nature it doesn't have a say versus Torah. Torah has ownership over nature. And Torah can decide to change it. And we find that through history, not just in incidences of splitting of the Red Sea, or of people like Pinchas ben Yair, who demand. I mean, the Yom HaShishi, the whole world was created if the Jewish people don't accept Torah. Therefore, Torah dictates how things are. And if the Torah understands everything. Torah doesn't ignore facts. Torah says, I understand that if you work for the 6th year, it doesn't make sense for you to have food for the 6th, 7th, and 8th year. But we're not asking nature. God's in charge of this world, and God's Torah. God created Teva, nature, and Torah is higher than nature. And God decided that Torah is the one who dictates the reality, not the nature. So that's how we see. So that's a very elevated concept, right? That's not just a regular concept. The idea that we go right into Shvius, we go right into Shemitah, this is high ideas. And what is the end of the parasha is? The end of the parasha talks about talks about don't make idols. As Shapsai say to Shmar, just keep my Shabbos. It's telling us just keep the Shabbos, which is as if you kept the whole Torah. Fear my temple, my sanctuary. And the idea of building the temple is making the dwelling place for Hashem in this world. The Medrash says, Hanimka la'akum, Meshkosov Neza v'nimker la'akar mishpachas ger, Hakasim daber sh'layemer hoyel v'rabi ovid avodah mechal v'shabbos afani. Who are we talking to? Keep my Shabbos. Don't serve idols. We're talking about a person who was sold as a slave to a Gentile. The lowest place the person could be. He's no longer part of the fold of the Jewish people. Not that he's not a Jew, but if he's been sold to a Gentile, he doesn't even have the ability to be a servant to a Jew. And the person may think that now that I'm a servant of a Gentile who doesn't have an obligation to keep Shabbos or doesn't keep the Shabbos, who serves idols, maybe now I lost my total independence. My total being has been lost now because I'm a slave to a Gentile. Maybe I also should desecrate the Shabbos. The Torah has to warn such a person. No, it's not like that. You're not going to serve idols even if your master does. Keep the Shabbos. You still be faithful to the base of Mikdash. So the beginning of the parasha is talking on the highest level, a mindset of total freedom to Torah, a place where Torah totally dictates the reality. The idea that there's the Shemitah, and the parasha ends on the lowest level of a person who's fallen so low, that's been sold as a slave to a Gentile, that thinks possibly they don't even have to keep Torah mitzvahs anymore. They could bow down to idols because they've totally lost who they are. So we see that the end of the parsha, which we said we're supposed to always end in an elevated space. Not only don't we end in an elevated space, we end in the lowest of spaces. We start off the parsha talking about things that are beyond nature. Even Torah regularly doesn't say that 3 years could be had in 1 year. The Torah usually recognizes you have to work, and when you work, you'll have what to eat. But Torah made an exception. In the way Torah sees things, when it comes to the laws of sabbatical, that God is going to make a blessing in the 6th year that's going to last 3 years. Torah understands a person may ask, how can I do sabbatical? It's going to affect not just the 7th year, it's going to affect the 8th year. So the Torah recognizes that the person may be wondering, how am I going to eat? Torah includes the question in Torah. Means when the Torah includes a question in Torah, means Torah recognizes the question as a legitimate question. That means that the Torah recognizes that typically there's no basis to rest the ground for a year, because when are you going to eat for the 7th and 8th year? You can't rely on a miracle. A person can't say, I'm going to work in the 6th year and expect to eat for 6, 7, and 8 years. That's a miracle. And you're not going to rely on a miracle. So the Torah recognizes that traditionally it's a good question. Nevertheless, Torah made an exception. Torah answers the question that I'm going to bless for 3 years, and that's supernatural. And the Torah changes the nature that Torah usually accepts. In this case, Torah says, I'm making an exception. I decided that you should listen to nature, and now I'm telling you that nature is not dictating in this situation. And in this situation, you rest on the 7th year, and you're going to have enough food from the 6th year to leave food for you to eat on the 6th, 7th, and even the beginning of the 8th year until things start growing. It means that the beginning of the parasha talks about that the nature that goes with the cosmos, meaning to say that there are energies of the stars that God created that it should be, that every blade of grass has a focus from an energy above that says Shemaka Isai, that says you have to grow. But the Torah says that's usually becomes the laws of sabbatical, we change that. That's so that again, the beginning of the parasha is in a very elevated space. In the end of the parasha. Yeah, I don't want to leave with the question. Hold on, let's see if we should jump to the question. The basic question we get. There seems to be a long answer. We're going to have to stick with the energy of the question. So there it says, the end of the parasha. Meduber is talking about Ma'amad Matzav should be K'tzei HaFachi. And the opposite. Leizu Vacha Eino L'Mayim HaTeva. She'ein Zu L'Mayim HaTeva. Leizu B'vav L'Shateva Ein Messiah L'Torah. V'adrab She'seis L'Torah. Eloid Zeh She'astiri Ad K'ekach She'mitzad Zed She'nimker L'Akar Mishpat Gya Yoshlai Etzlai Nisin Smak Mafil Avod V'Ed Zara. That because this person has fallen so low, that he lives by a Gentile, he thinks that maybe he has to also serve idols. He thinks that maybe the 10 Commandments don't apply to him or her. You heard God say, don't serve idols. Nevertheless, this person thinks maybe it doesn't apply to me. I've fallen so low, I'm being sold to a slave, to a Gentile. Sorry, that Moshe only gave us 211 mitzvahs. Why? Because the first two mitzvahs are not we heard from get it from Moshe. Without any limitations, even from Moshe. Even the way we heard from Moshe, that only applied to the 611 mitzvahs. But the first two mitzvahs, V'ayim Hashem your Lord, and don't serve idols, we heard all ourselves, every person who lived then and lives now, heard it from God. From the way it is in the highest, not even the way it lowered itself into the wisdom of Atzilus, skip the brackets. A person could fall so low. That person maybe who sold to servant, to slave, as a Gentile, that even when he heard from God, or what she heard from God, don't serve idols, you think it doesn't apply to you. I'm so low, this doesn't apply to me. The Torah has to tell us, no, it does apply to you. So here we see again, the Torah starts on such a high note in this week's parsha and ends on such a low note. We're talking about a person that mamish is as low as you could fall, that the Torah has to say that know that even though you may seem to be in the lowest place possible, you have to know that the Torah still applies to you. So we'll get a little bit into the answer. ומבואר בתניא שכל אחד מישראל אפילו קהל שבקהל המוכן למסור נפש על קדושת השם. זה איך ייתכן כזכת איתך שאני מכיר לעכו יעבוד עבודה זרה. The Rebbe says, so the question is, what is even the thinking? If a person heard from God themselves, and therefore a person is able to die for God, how would you think even if you found so low to be sold to a Gentile, that you're able to survive? You heard God say, don't do that. What makes the person think? Because you look at your master. You say, I've lost all self. What's a slave? A slave loses self. I've lost self. And my master, who's in charge of me about everything I do, when I sleep, when I eat, what I sleep, what I eat, who I'm with, who's my wife, everything, the master is in charge. So you think I'm no longer anybody. And my master serves idols, maybe I have to serve idols. There's no Not that you're going to serve idols with your heart. That you would never do. Because you heard God say, don't serve idols. A Jew has nothing to do with idols. But I've lost anything I could do. I've lost my ability to make any decisions. So if he wants me to bow my body, I bow my body. I don't believe in it. I don't serve the idols because I believe in it. But I'm not doing that. I don't do anything that I believe in. I don't eat the foods that I want to eat. I'm not with the people. I don't do the jobs I want to do. I've lost all self. Although, like the Alter Rebbe says, you don't believe it at all in your heart. You're not really bowing to an idol. It just seems like you are. If anyone's watching you, may think you are. But nevertheless, you would get punished in biblical times or in temple times, when even in such a situation, the Bezdin, the Sanhedrin has law, would kill you for that. Why? Because we don't, what's in your heart, we can't judge. All we can judge what you're doing. So the person thinks that maybe, okay, I have to do what my master does because he's in charge of me now. The Jewish people said to Yecheskel, the Rebbe quotes this many times, the Jewish people were sold to slavery, right? The Jewish people were taken out of Eretz Yisrael. They were exiled into Babylonia in the first temple. Who was with them in Babylonia? The prophet Yecheskel. The Jewish people said, we were sold. God was in charge of us when we were in Eretz Yisrael. He gave us over to the Babylonians, to Nebuchadnezzar. Maybe we have to be like them now. מכיוון שבזמן הגולוס גודל העולם והאסתר, כל כך עד שיכול ליאס מציאס, שלמים חלק ומשפחת גר. A person thinks that's it. That's when the temple is standing. But now it's exile. A person may think I have to live with the times. You want me to be like a Jewish person? That's when the temple was standing. Now I don't live like that. The rules have changed. Now, it may not be that Nebuchadnezzar today is standing with a stick. We may even have the freedoms to make our own choices, but the person says, my mind has been changed. I live in a different society. I live in a society that the world decides the reality. You have to step back from the severity of the Rebbe is giving you an example, but we could apply it till today. A person technically may think you have the freedom to make choices, but he says, what do you mean? My kids go to public schools. My social circles are so and so. My jobs, I went to college and therefore my job dictates when I should go to work, when I shouldn't go to work, if I'm allowed to daven chakras at the minyan, if I'm not allowed to daven chakras at the minyan. If I can keep Shabbos, I can't keep Shabbos. None of my friends keep Shabbos. Everyone goes to the movies. That's the same idea here. A person says, well, we're in Golus now. You can't do like that. Even if it just seems like that. Okay, David is going to finish this last piece from Yecheskel. The Yecheskel said it's not going to happen. You can't be like the nations. Meaning, love Mammon and Shalom love the Rabbi Zeira. That when that Amen was a Jew, was a Gentile, Elisha made certain exceptions for him because he had a master. We won't get into that story. But nevertheless, when it comes to Yecheskel, Yecheskel says to the Jewish people, it's not like that. In Yad Chazaka. Right? So the Rebbe obviously is going to give an answer, but the answer seems to be going long, and someone's waiting for me. So the idea is that we have a question. It's not good to end with the question, but we know where the answer is going. The answer is going here is obviously that we're not leaving the principle. And the principle is that we end with an elevation. That means that in our challenges, even sometimes we think that in our darkest moment, sometimes that's really the basis of achievement. Because it's maybe, yes, you started off Eretz Yisrael going into Shemitah, but that was coming from the desert, and everything was perfect. But sometimes in the imperfection and in the challenges, and we're able to overcome those challenges, and we don't give into the forces of pressure. So that's actually stronger than just walking into the land and starting off with the sabbatical. All right, everyone. I want to wish everyone a good Shabbos. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.